welcome, Andrea. Thank you for taking the time to jump on this call with me and learn about Cape Town, South Africa. This is Andrea Glew. Andrea sells real estate with Geffen, Sotheby's International Realty. And Andrea, why don't you introduce yourself to our viewers and just let us know a little bit about your background and work history and education and kind of what led you into real estate. Let us know about you.
Perfect. Thank you, Brian. Thank you for inviting me onto this platform, and good to meet you and also whoever ends up viewing this video. My name's actually Andrea, so not Andrea, Andrea. I was born and raised in South Africa, actually in Johannesburg. So did my initial schooling in Johannesburg, and then only moved to Cape Town in about 2003. So I've been here 20 years, which sort of makes me a Cape Townian, but absolutely love it here. Wouldn't want to leave the city. It's considered one of the most beautiful cities in the world for good reason. And it offers so much in terms of lifestyle. And yeah, I absolutely love living here. My background, my education background is that I got a degree after school in industrial psychology. And then my first job was actually in advertising. So that was an industry that had always intrigued me. I'd always been fascinated with how the advertising industry and the concepts of marketing and selling influence certain purchases and advance the value of businesses and brands. So I was drawn to the clever and innovative ways in which advertising agencies promote these brands, and that in fact does lead one into the property industry in quite a substantial way. We are, at the end of the day, we are selling our lifestyle and selling our city and the homes within it. So you have to really love the place that you are selling and believe in it. And if you believe that it's a good product and a value proposition, then your buyers will be much more likely to take that on board. When my children were growing up, I left sort of formal employment and went into more flexible work. So I left the advertising industry and then spent some years doing various things. One of which was I had a bridging finance company. And so what that is bridging. It was largely to the property industry, to agents themselves, bridging their commissions, because as we all know, there's quite a time lag between when you complete a deal and when you eventually get paid. So a lot of agents choose to bridge that gap. So they were one of my clientele, and otherwise to buyers and sellers for the costs involved, the transactional costs involved in buying and selling property. So that was quite a rewarding industry to be in. I learned a lot. I dealt with a lot of conveyancing attorneys and bond registration attorneys. So one deals with a variety of different folk in that context, and it was an interesting industry to be in. Then ended up buying a plot of land and building our own home. And through that process, I fell in love with the whole property management process of building, constructing, and finishing a home, and turned that into my new project, which was an interior decorating consultancy,
Okay.
which I then worked and ran just on my own for some time, before eventually landing up in real estate itself. So I feel as if I've constantly been circling the property industry most of my life. What I hadn't mentioned yet was that my mother was a top real estate agent in Johannesburg while I was growing up. So I grew up going to show houses on a Sunday and walking around properties and looking at them and finding out how much they were worth, and looking at the way in which they were decorated and how that could detract or maximize the potential of a property. So yes, I feel as if property and the way in which a property is presented has almost been a recurring theme through my life.
So how long have you been selling homes now?
So I've been with Sotheby's since 2019, and I've been on the Atlantic seaboard, which was newish to me, because when I first moved to Cape Town, it was more the southern suburbs that I lived in. So the Atlantic seaboard was an area that I wanted to explore, and has been a very rewarding journey.
Okay. So I noticed that, when I go to the website, there's a lot of gorgeous homes that you have listed for sale. I'll flip through some of those as we talk here.
Yes.
But first of all, before we get into it, how many kids do you have?
I've got two daughters. They're now 23 and 21 years old. So they're both finishing off tertiary studies, and then they'll be off on their own.
Have they stayed in town, so to speak?
They both are still in Cape Town.
Okay, nice. Well, I wanted to dive into the business, and there's several things that I want to talk about. One would be if I'm a buyer or a seller, but if I'm a buyer coming into town and maybe you don't know a lot about Cape Town, you don't know a lot about purchasing a home, the process, where to live, what to buy, what to expect in the process, down to the minute detail of how long it takes and what the contingencies are that are typical, and that there's a variety of aspects to it, and then how to find a realtor and what to expect from that process and how they get paid, down to the detail.
Yes.
So maybe we can start talking a little bit about the city, and then talk about that whole realm of searching for a home and purchasing a home there.
Okay. Well, so I think, as I mentioned, one of the most important things that a buyer is going to be considering is quality of life when purchasing a home. And Cape Town specifically, I believe, offers the best quality of life in South Africa. Having said that, there are other parts of this country that are magnificent in their own ways. Johannesburg is considered the epicenter of wealth and business, I would say, of South Africa, and has many beautiful suburbs. It's a very green city, lots of trees, and some very beautiful parts of Johannesburg. It's also located within fairly easy reach of the Kruger National Park, which is one of the the biggest attractions, I would say, to South Africa for foreigners, and obviously home of the big five of wildlife, which would be your lion, your leopard, your buffalo, your rhino, and your elephant. So all of those together with, gosh, thousands of other animal species are located in the Kruger Park, and it's an enormous area. It's about 2 million hectares of game reserve that is protected and maintained by the government. So the proximity, relative proximity of places like Johannesburg to the Kruger National Park, you know, have a benefit on the lifestyle of those residents, because they're able to get there without too much of a problem. Whereas for us in Cape Town, we have to fly, or it's a very long drive. There's also Durban, which is on our eastern coast. So Cape Town on the west coast, Durban and KwaZulu-Natal and all the little towns that make up that area on the eastern coast of the country. And they have possibly the best weather in that they have a more subtropical temperate climate. So they don't have the coldness of and rain of winter that we have in the Western Cape. They have a real Mediterranean type of feel to that area. And so they're on the Indian Ocean, and Durban is where one of our largest and busiest seaports is located. So it's an important hub for South Africa in terms of imports and exports. Okay. Then Cape Town, of course, you know, with Table Mountain, as you have there behind you, and the Atlantic Ocean, is just an iconic part of South Africa, and probably the most well-known part of South Africa, and draws hundreds of thousands of visitors every year. Thankfully, our tourism industry is booming nicely since COVID restrictions were lifted. And we have a population here of about 4.8 million people in the city, versus Johannesburg, which is a little bit bigger at 6.1 million people. And our population is growing steadily, about 100,000 in the last year. And that's probably attributable to a good portion of semigration, what we call semigration, which is when people decide to move within South Africa for work reasons or for lifestyle reasons. COVID was, I'd say, an unprecedented time in everybody's lives. And we found, I think, that one is able to sometimes live and work in a better way. So instead of living close to work purely because it is close to work, people discovered that they could sometimes work remotely or commute for work and live in a more attractive or a better lifestyle option. So Cape Town and what we call the Garden Route, which is further up the coast from Cape Town, those sorts of towns suddenly boomed after COVID, and the property market really has done exceptionally well in those areas. So that's in a nutshell what we term semigration. A bit of a background of Cape Town was, it's considered the oldest city of South Africa. It was established by the Dutch East India Company in 1652, and it was a stopping point for ships traveling to the Dutch East Indies for trade. So we have many cultural influences within the city, and various different areas have evolved as a consequence of that. So notable suburbs or parts of the city, of course, Atlantic seaboard is where I work, and that's my focus, and that's where a lot of the very exclusive suburbs of Clifton, Camps Bay, Backoven, Llandudno, Bantry Bay, Fresnay are all located in that area. And they considered exclusive both by price, but also because those areas are contained by the mountain above and the sea below. So there's only so much property that is located or able to be located in those areas, and of course the natural beauty of those areas is breathtaking.
You can see it behind me. Stunning.
Yes. And what's just over your shoulder is the Greenpoint Stadium, that big circular building. No, the other shoulder, yes, there. The big circular. So that was built for the Soccer World Cup, and stadiums were built throughout South Africa, and all of them, the design of all of those stadiums was unique for each city. And so we've got the Greenpoint Stadium. It's located in a very pretty part of the city, easy access to the V&A waterfront, which is a shopping and restaurant hub. And it's also close to the Cape Town Harbour and all the beaches of the Atlantic seaboard. So it's located in a very good position. And behind that, in your picture, you'll see the what we call the City Bowl. So that's the actual city of Cape Town, and we're a lot of around about there. Okay. So a lot of businesses are located in that node, and then of course the mountain above it, which gets its name, Table Mountain, of course, from the flat tabletop surface of the mountain. That mountain is to its top, it's about 1,082 meters, I think, is the height of the mountain, and one can either walk it to get to the top, or there is a cableway which takes you comfortably up and down. So it's one of our most visited tourist attractions, is Table Mountain.
So tell me about just very briefly about the city, and if I'm moving here, what are the demographics and where do I want to live? And I know that depends on how much money you have, as it always does everywhere in the world. But based on sort of those demographics, what options are there, and of course, tell us about the beaches as well. Okay.
So look, a purchaser is going to look at firstly, what are their requirements? What are their needs? Do they have children? Do they need to be close to schools? Where are they going to be working? And then obviously price of property plays a huge role as well. So within Cape Town, we have, as I've mentioned, the Atlantic seaboard. Then there's the southern suburbs, which is considered a very family friendly sort of group of suburbs, and its homes there are slightly bigger. Homes have bigger gardens, and there's a lot of top quality schooling available within that area. There's also wine farms, the Constantia wine farms, which attract a lot of visitors and make the area very beautiful. So you've got gardens and parks and vineyards, and there's also good proximity to forests and the nature reserves. So people who enjoy walking and hiking have a lot of opportunity there for those kinds of activities. Further from the southern suburbs, but on the same trajectory of the city, is what's called False Bay, and that's also on the sea. So it's the counterpart to the Atlantic seaboard, but it lies on the Indian Ocean. So the water there is warmer, and there's very quaint and pretty little towns like Muizenberg, St. James, Cork Bay, that lie on that side. So those homes are still very desirable because they have excellent views and obviously the warmer water, but they're not as highly contested price-wise as the Atlantic seaboard. Mm-hmm. The northern suburbs of Cape Town is attractive to it's a mecca for sports people, water sports, particularly kite surfing, and so areas like Blobergstrand, Milnerton, Tableview, they're all considered very, and they're close to schools as well. So they're newer areas, relatively newer areas, and there's quite a high percentage of Afrikaans-speaking South Africans that live there and have settled there, but offers very, very good value for families to live in that area. A little bit further out from the city, so one needs to consider that if driving in to the city for work is something one would need to do, because there is traffic which builds up along, in peak times.
Is there any transportation system, like trains or anything of that nature?
There is a train system, but it's not like the US. It's still relatively in its infancy, and it's not consistently reliable, I would say. So it is there, but a lot of Cape Townians tend to drive themselves. Okay. So it is possible to take the train, and we also have a bus system, but a lot of Cape Townians do choose to travel in cars themselves.
So does it sound accurate that the closer you are to downtown, maybe just that's how it is here, that the closer to downtown, the more valuable property tends to be, or the more expensive?
Yes. Look, I mean, there are certain areas further out that are very expensive. I mean, Constantia and Bishop's Court are amongst the 7 most expensive areas in Cape Town and possibly in South Africa. So within those further suburbs, there are very highly valuable property areas, but generally, yes, the closer you are to the city, that is something that people do value, so that they cut down their commuting time.
So what's the climate like, and what are the beaches like? I heard you say rainy and maybe cool sometimes of the year, but what are those like?
So Cape Town, well, look, I mean, the climate within South Africa, because South Africa is such a huge country, the climate changes depending on which area you're in. Cape Town and the Western Cape has a wet and rainy and chilly winters and dry summers. So our spring to summer months of September to April are that's our dry season. And then where we are right now, we're in our rainy season at the moment. But because we're on the coast, we don't get as cold as what we call the high veld, which is where Johannesburg is. And they sit on the plateau of South Africa. And so they experience, early mornings and evenings are very chilly there in the winter, but they don't have the rainfall. So in the winter they have a dry, cold winter, and they have hot, wet summers. And then Durban, the Natal coast, as I've said, is more subtropical. So you don't get the extremes of temperature on that coastline.
But now we're getting into spring and summer for your year.
Yes.
Right? And
so looking forward to that.
Is that right? So what is does it get really hot, or is it a nice climate and good times at the beaches?
It can get really hot, but our top temperatures here are in the early 30s, generally speaking. We occasionally get a day that it's going to get beyond that, but that's not a general rule of thumb. So I would say our summer temperatures are something between the high 20s, early 30s. That would be hot summer weather. But we can also get, we can also get some cooler days that intersperse that, and we have wind, that comes off of the mountain. So that does cool things down quite considerably.
But it sounds like good beach weather.
Very good beach weather, and we have the most, I would say, arguably the best beaches in the world. We have lovely soft sandy beaches, and a lot of them are, especially sort of Clifton, Camps Bay area, are considered blue flag beaches, where yes, which is so they're very well maintained, the beaches. They're cleaned regularly, and you just have so much beauty around. That's Lion's Head. That's the little mountain peak that's behind you, and beautiful sort of promenades with restaurants and bars, and so we have a lovely coastline, let's put it that way.
Yeah, it looks amazing. So, all right, so we've talked about the area, we've talked about, South Africa, and then the city and some of the different areas and the beaches and the climate and some of the things to do. If you're coming in to purchase a home, or maybe you get a job there, or you want to make a change because of COVID or whatever it may be. I think the world's changing now again, right? So we had a surge of people moving to work remotely. Who knows what to expect moving forward, but definitely the capital markets have changed. There's been a big shift. So we'll see how that impacts the future. But how do you go find a realtor? Who do you want to work with, and what should you expect from the purchase process, and how do realtors get paid? So there's a lot there. So I'll just let you go.
Okay. So I would say if you were coming in and you were looking for a realtor, you would probably start with the various internet searches, the various selling platforms that are that reach the whole of South Africa. So it's a public platform, and there's various ones like Property 24 and Private Property, and you can go on there, and pretty much most properties that are on sale in the market will be listed there. Some sellers would prefer not to have their properties on there. They prefer to have it either just listed with a real estate agency, or they value their privacy, and they don't want that sort of publicity associated with their property. So I would say 80% of properties on the market will be listed there. So that is a good place to start. But then, word of mouth and going on to the major real estate agencies' websites, both within South Africa as well as any international sites, that's going to also give you a good idea of who the major players are in the real estate industry within South Africa, and who comes across and gives you the right sort of feeling, and you feel you would fit best. So Sotheby's, as you know, I mean, we're a major global player. We have offices in 81 countries and territories around the world. We have over 1,000 offices. I think we generate millions, or actually billions, in real estate revenue across the globe. I think I'll check my fingers, but I think it was something like 26 billion in 2022. Mm-hmm. So Sotheby's offers a great opportunity for buyers, and what's also good about our platform is that, being such a global agency, we are also quite connected to each other via our sites and via our operating system. So we can refer buyers and sellers to one another, and we can also see what's on sale. So for instance, if I wanted to see what was on the market in Spain, I could look through our internal platform and see exactly what properties are available there, and I can refer my buyers or my sellers to them, and likewise. So that's a good advantage dealing with such a global presence as Sotheby's. So that's possibly how you would find a realtor in the city, and then the process would be, contacting the agent and telling them what your requirements are, and then going and pounding the pavement and seeing the good, the bad, the ugly, and deciding, narrowing it down to what is important. A lot of my buyers, I'll take them to the various areas, so that they get a sense of what is going to be suitable to them. So, my major areas are Camps Bay, Backhaven, and Llandudno, but if I feel that a client is going to do better in a different area, such as Hout Bay or somewhere else, Constantia, I will make sure that I expose them to those areas as well.
So what I heard you say is there's two main public websites, but unlike here in the US, it sounds like you don't use an MLS. So we have, an MLS. We're a member of an association. The association has access to MLS. MLS is where you enter your listings, and then it disseminates out to public websites if the brokerage companies want it to. It sounds like here in Cape Town, you basically own the listing as the brokerage, and if you so choose, you can put it out on these public websites. You have to pay to put them on those websites.
You do, and in fact, even sellers themselves can register and list their own property. So you don't have to go through a real estate broker in order to list a property. But many choose to do so. Well, the majority choose to do so because of the added service that real estate brokers provide. We have our own databases of not just sellers looking at the moment, but sellers that were looking in the market and have maybe not found what they were looking for, and they've put it on hold for a bit, and so could be converted back into a purchaser. We also know our areas. We know where to take our buyers to. We can give a lot of advice in terms of tax, in terms of where to buy, how to structure deals, whether to buy it in a personal name, in a company name, all of those sorts of things that perhaps the layperson would not know. And so a real estate broker is going to give value to anyone looking at purchasing, and to sellers likewise.
So, all right. So we have no MLS. That means, essentially, I guess the question would be on the list side, what does that look like when somebody lists a house with your brokerage? What does that listing agreement look like? In other words, tell me about how you're paid.
So what I would do,
both sides of the transaction.
Okay, so if one lists a property, essentially it's a contract with the seller at a certain price to try and procure a buyer for them at that price, and it details the conditions of that arrangement, such as timings and brokerage fee. And brokerage fee in South Africa, possibly anything between 5 and 7% of the full purchase price. It depends on the purchase price, how negotiable that commission is. But generally, one sort of sits at around 5% in Cape Town. And
does that go to the listing agent, or does that go to both sides?
That is paid only from the seller's side. The purchaser does not pay any commission whatsoever. The only time a purchaser would pay commission is on an auction purchase, which is run completely differently to a normal sales arrangement, and there the purchaser would pay the commission entirely, and that would be at a rate of 10% of the purchase.
Wow. Well, I know when I spoke to the gentleman in Sydney, he said that most of their sales were auctions, so it sounds different in Cape Town.
Yes. So auctions are still relatively they're often done on commercial transactions, more so than residential, but it is changing, and there are certain properties that do successfully go on auction. I would say, though, that auctions have a slight stigma in South Africa still. People tend to think of that as a distress sale rather than you know, sort of a normal
Understood.
way of processing a sales transaction. So, but you know, I do believe that in places like New Zealand and Australia, it is commonplace, and I think it's likely to become more so in South Africa. But at this stage, you know, it's still considered something that commercial or industrial properties would more likely be auctioned.
So do most
Um,
buyers work with a buyer agent?
the buyer agents do exist, and yes, it's a lot of foreign buyers know the concept and are very happy to work on that basis. South African buyers are less au fait with the concept, and they tend to either look around and shop through an assortment of agents, or they say to an agent, look, you know, I don't want to be looking for properties and sorting through. I want you to do that for me. And you know, and yes, then in a sense you are the buyer's agent. But yeah, essentially, as an agent, we are the seller's agent, and we represent the seller. And you know, we try and procure the best purchase price and the best buyer for that seller.
So how many, you don't have, I'm not going to hold you to the number, but what percentage of sales do you think has a buyer agent that represents the buyer alone? What's the percentage of deals that is the case, do you think?
Yeah, please don't hold me to it. I would say probably in the region of about 15%.
You said 15?
Mm,
Okay, so
but
it's very low. So most sales are just basically the listing agent represents the seller, the buyer's not represented. The listing agent keeps that 5 to 7%, whatever was negotiated. If there is a buyer agent involved, do they share that 5 to 7% with the buyer side agent?
so it depends on whether there is a mandate in place, you know, a seller's mandate in place with another agency. So if not,
What is that?
then the buyer's agent would still be would still attract the full brokerage. If there is a seller's mandate in place with another agency, then the buyer's agent would have to go to the seller's agent and bring the buyer, and they would then share the sale.
What's the seller's mandate? I don't know what that is.
So in other words, when one lists a property for sale, the agent is the seller's agent.
Hmm.
So I, as a Sotheby's agent, list a property for sale. I now have a contract with the seller. So if another agent comes and brings a buyer to me, we would then share. We would agree to share the commission, the applicable brokerage fee, usually 50-50, but it can be negotiated up or down. So it would be negotiated between the two agencies rather than the seller making that decision. So the seller has appointed an agent, and essentially the seller doesn't really mind how that buyer is procured.
Right.
It's not going to change what they pay.
Got it. Yeah, here in Texas, we have a listing agreement with one amount, and we typically agree as a listing agent to share part of that with a buyer agent if there is one. And you know, that might be half, but it's negotiable. It's
Yes.
often
So a similar situation.
okay. But if there is not a buyer agent involved, or maybe they don't list it in the MLS here, so it's considered private or off MLS sale, then it may have an increased chance of a direct sale with a buyer who is not represented, in which case that listing agent can keep all of that commission.
Yes.
So it
So
sounds.
I would say the majority of our sales work that way.
Okay. Okay. So the majority, the listing agent has the listing. Maybe it's on your website. Maybe you put it on the public website. But the more listings you have, the more business you drum up, the more buyers you're bringing in your door, and then it sounds like most of the deals are with buyer unrepresented. Do you serve?
But having said that, we as real estate agents, we do try and work together because that's definitely for the seller's best interest is for us to work together to bring the best deal for that seller that is possible in the current market.
Got it. But it's not too much different from what we experience here. Maybe here we do more deals with a buyer agent, is what it sounds like, than there.
Well, perhaps on your side it's more formalized, whereas you have a buyer's agent contract. That's not as typical here, but it does happen. But we do still work together as different agents on the same deal to get the best price for our seller.
Well, here
and for the buyer.
Here as a buyer agent, we actually agree when you list something in the MLS, you're agreeing to offer a certain amount of compensation to the buyer agents, and you can look that up as a buyer agent. So when you show a house to a buyer, what they're offering in compensation. You may have it, like my policy is always have a buyer agreement. We have a fee, and so if they offer less than that fee, the buyer has to make up the difference. But yes, we have a contract, but we also know what sellers are offering or what their agents are offering as a commission. So it sounds like since you don't have an MLS there, you don't really know as a buyer agent what that seller's going to offer. But it sounds like you'll work with them if the deal works out and share the commissions. Is that?
So again, it wouldn't be the seller that would be offering it. You would negotiate it with the other agent. So you would approach the other agent, the seller's agent, and you would say, I've got a buyer. Are you open to sharing your listing? And then what is the commission breakdown, and how would you be willing to share? So those are the things that you would negotiate up front before taking your buyer through there.
Got it. Yeah, and for me, whatever the model is, getting buyers in front of the most houses is the goal, because you don't want compensation to get in the way, but you need to be paid as an agent, and then the seller wants to get their house in front of the most people possible as well. So it's always interesting to hear the different models that hopefully lead to that end, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that is definitely the goal, is to give the best possible service to both your seller and your buyer, and try and meet in the middle. So a good and fair deal is concluded.
So about how long does it take to find a house? About how many houses do people look at? And then what is that, once you do make an offer and get something under contract, what does that process look like?
So look, it depends on each individual buyer. Sometimes buyers can know exactly what they want and make a decision fairly quickly. Other buyers not sure what they want and waver between various requirements, such as they want it for their family, but maybe they also want to rent it out in times where they're not going to be there. And so there's various requirements, and it's a process of narrowing down which property best matches all of those requirements. So there's no real rule of thumb in terms of how long it's going to take. That depends on your buyer. But I would say generally, uh, within a couple of months, most buyers will have found something that they really like, and other buyers, it can take as little as a couple of days. So it just generally depends on how well they have their requirements down pat. And then your next question was how long for the whole process. So once there is an offer to purchase signed and accepted by both parties, then it generally takes about 3 months for the transfer process. So there's various stages that it has to go through, and it has to go to the deeds office. And so generally we look at about 2 to 3 months, but we generally err on the longer side. And if it transfers earlier, then that's usually a bonus for everyone involved. But we don't like to cut the time frame too narrow, because people have to sometimes get bonds approved and have time to get deposits in place, and there's various requirements that are required on both sides.
Well, tell us about that, because here we get it under contract, it goes to a title company. The title company, takes the money from the buyer gives an earnest money, which let's call it, maybe customarily around 1%, but it's negotiable. They have an option fee, which allows them 7 to 10 days, a negotiable amount of time to terminate for any reason. That's when they can get their inspections. So you send an inspector over, it looks at it, figures out if there's problems, and then you can negotiate repairs within that time frame. And then there's some other contingencies like, title commitments from the title company. They insure the property, from defects of title, and there may be a homeowner association, and they give you some time to look at those documents and things like that. But here it's like 30 days is the norm. And if it's cash, it could be 2 weeks. If it's, a little bit longer, maybe 45 days, but it's really a short process, and that's it. But I know other parts of the world, it sounds like it goes through more of a legal process, and I don't know what bonds have to do with it or whatever. So help us understand that.
Okay, so yes, in South Africa there is a whole legal process. So generally, the purchaser will have to put down a deposit, and as a rule of thumb, that could be around about 10% of the purchase price.
So 10.
10% would need to be paid by the purchaser within a set amount of days. So that generally around 3 to 7 working days, but can be negotiated depending on each circumstance. And after that, the balance of the purchase price, whether it's in cash or a mortgage or a combination of both, that then requires the next period of time. And so legal processes such as the cancellation from the seller's side, cancellation of a previous mortgage, the appointment of a new bank to come in and do a valuation, and then give approval for a bond and how much that bond would be. So there's various time frames given for those processes. Then from the seller's side, they have various compliances that they have to have concluded, and those are things like inspections, as you mentioned. So various inspections and repair work that may come out of those inspections, and those are all on the seller side. They have to arrange that and get certificates and have any repairs that are necessary, have that take place.
These repairs
Then
negotiable, or are these repairs required by the government?
so the compliance repairs are compulsory, and those are on things such as electrical, water, beetle, and gas, and electric fencing. So those 5 things
What's beetle?
need beetle. So if there's been any little insects that have maybe been under the structure of the home
Got it.
and have
Okay.
maybe eaten up, so those things get checked as a matter of course. They are compulsory. They are not something that the seller can say, no, I'm not doing. But further repairs, can be negotiated. So it can be put into the sales agreement that the garden's looking a bit tatty and needs to be repaired, or those sorts of things can be put in by a purchaser as a condition. We have what's called we have a clause in our contract in South Africa called voetstuts, and essentially what that means is as is. So you're buying a property as is, unless otherwise stated in the conditions of the contract. So anything that the purchaser requires to be repaired or to be fixed over and above those compliance certificates needs to be addressed in the special conditions of the contract. Otherwise, it is deemed to be as is.
So how do you know what to put in special provisions if you don't have an inspection yet?
So the inspections will take care of all those major things. For instance, electrical, that will be the full electrical system of the home.
Understood.
Will need to be checked. If there's lights that have blown, and transmitters that need to be replaced, that will be in there. If it's an entire wiring system throughout a house, that will need to be done as part of the sale. So that is a guarantee that those systems will be in functioning, good working order. But anything over and above that would need to be put down in the special conditions section of the agreement. So there's all of these processes take a bit of time, and so generally to get all the financial part of the transaction in place, and there's also rates that have to be paid, so the seller will have to make sure that the rates, which is the property taxes that they pay on a monthly basis, are up to date. And if they're not, then they need to make sure that happens as a requirement of the transaction. The purchaser also has to put a deposit down for a new account to be opened in their name. So there's various things that need to happen, and that's why it generally takes between 2 to 3 months for all of those to be fulfilled.
Who's handling all of that? Here it's the title company, and they have some legal there with them. Who handles that there?
So here we have what's called a conveyancing attorney, and the conveyancing attorney is usually appointed by the seller. Sometimes it's negotiated, but generally appointed by the seller, and that attorney will lead the process through the various steps. But there are other legal people involved, and that's the bond cancellation attorney if there was a mortgage bond on the property when it was sold. So that's a legal entity that's involved. And then the attorney that handles a new mortgage bond on behalf of the bank, whatever bank is appointed. So these attorneys all work together to make the various steps happen as they should.
So how many people are you hiring on the sales side and the buy side once you get a contract? So I assume that you, as the realtor or the real estate agent, puts together the offer. Where do those forms come from? And then who takes over? How do you find them?
We put together the offer, but as I say, the seller would appoint the conveyancer. We could assist with that if they don't have an attorney that they have worked with or would prefer. We can give guidance there, but it's then the bank that would appoint a new attorney if there was a new mortgage going to be put in place. So we wouldn't be involved in that. The conveyancing attorney and the bond cancellation and transferring attorneys, they communicate and deal with each other. And then obviously as the realtor, we're kept appraised, and we need to make sure that we follow up, that our seller is doing what he needs to do at given points of time, and the purchaser as well. So we're an overview, but we don't necessarily appoint any of these people involved.
So what are the risks that the buyer or seller take financially when getting under contract? And like, what's the risk of losing that 10% of earnest money, for example?
Look, I mean, deals do sometimes fall apart, but it's not something that happens that often. There's obviously clauses in place in the contract that deal with default or where someone hasn't done something in time, and then there's opportunity to redress that default, and time given for that. And if after everything, then the deposit, if it's on the purchaser side, the default, then the deposit can be lost, and that would go towards any costs that the sellers possibly incurred, as well as to brokerage fee.
So does the brokerage fee get paid only if it sells?
Generally speaking, unless there's a default by the purchaser that is considered irredeemable, and they forego or they lose their deposit.
I meant to ask you earlier about how much commission generally, I know it's negotiable, but how much would a buyer side agent earn on a sale?
Yes, it is negotiable, but generally we actually negotiated to 50%. So the seller's agent would get 50% and the buyer's agent would get 50%.
Maybe 2.5%, 3.5%, something like that.
Yes, exactly. Okay. So, but again, that is very much dependent on the seller's agent. So the agent that has the property to sell, they have more ability to negotiate on it. But having said that, then the buyer's agent can choose to take their buyer elsewhere if that negotiation isn't what they consider to be fair.
And are the strongest brokerages the ones that have the most listings?
I would say it's a combination. It's a combination of having listings and having a strong database of buyers and of people that you can call on to look at various properties. And So I would, it's a relationship game. You know, you need to have good relationships and long-term relationships with buyers as well as sellers. You know, it's not just the listings you have on now, it's the relationships you've developed and nurtured over time, and that's where your repeat business will come from.
So when you're looking for you as an agent, when you're looking for properties, I assume you can go to the two public websites, you can go to individual brokerage websites and look at their private listings that aren't on the public websites, and then maybe you can email your database and say, I've got a buyer looking for this, let me know what you've got. Does that sound about right?
Yes, absolutely. And so, you know,
You've frozen up.
is that better?
Okay, you're back. So
Okay.
yeah, so I asked the question, but I didn't hear your answer.
I would say it's a combination of both. You know, first prize is that you're going to have a good database of both buyers and sellers, so that at any given time you're able to provide one or other for you know, your buyers or your sellers needs. And so developing good stock, and having lots of property on your books is absolutely imperative in this business. But so is your relationships with your buyers and your sellers.
Well, speaking of good stock, I looked at some of your listings. Here's one of the pictures on one of your listings, which is gorgeous. I've got some other pictures that I can flip to, but it looks like you have some amazing high dollar luxury listings, some right on the beach, others with huge views, modern and varieties of styles. As a matter of fact, I'll switch to this one. Love this cottage style beach,
Yes.
open air, lots of light. This one.
So that is a property actually that I sold a little bit earlier this year, and it's in the suburb of Llandudno, which is a very exclusive, beautiful suburb with a beautiful beach at its core. And this property it's considered a bungalow because it's that beach style kind of home, and right on the rocks, as your first picture showed. And that was it's probably, I would say, my favorite sale to date. One, because it was just such a lovely, easy process. The buyer knew exactly what they were looking for, flew into South Africa, into Cape Town, spent a weekend with me looking at properties, and decided that weekend, this is the property I want. And within a couple of days we had concluded the deal. So it was a good experience from that perspective, and also it was a good price for the property was achieved, and one of the highest prices achieved in the area, certainly within the last year or two. So it was a really good
experience. I liked it. Very nice. Yeah, no, that's absolutely gorgeous. And I think the other one, well, here's the inside of another one that you sold. And let's see if I can find is this the view of that one?
Yeah, so that property is not sold. This property is still on the market at the moment, and it's a very beautiful position right on the beach. It's an area of Camps Bay called Glen Beach, and this property sits right just above the beach, and so it's a gorgeous property and very aspirational property.
Let's talk just quickly about um, what we've talked about the area and some of the nice things about the city and some of the different areas and things like that. But let's talk a little bit more granularly about the benefits of living in a particular area for, let's say, the more ultra wealthy crowd or maybe a higher end clientele. But first of all, before I forget, what do taxes look like when you live in South Africa? Is there a sort of sales tax? Is there an income tax? Is, property tax? Like, what does that look like?
Yes. So there is purchasers of property in South Africa will pay a property tax, and that will be in one of two ways. So the first could be a value added tax, we call it VAT, which is calculated at 15%, and that's set by the government, and that's on various products such as homes, but also things like groceries, and will all have value added tax added to them. And that portion will go to the state, to the government. Value added tax is charged on properties that have some kind of commercial dealing. So the property would need to be registered as a VAT registered company, which means there must have been some sort of going concern. The property would generally have been used for rentals or in some way to generate income. So you might have been running your business through that property, and therefore you've registered it as a VAT entity. So if it's registered as a VAT entity, it needs to be sold in that respect and will attract 15% tax, which the purchaser will pay. The only benefit of that is that if the purchaser is going to in turn put it into a VAT registered company, they can claim back that paid over a period of time. So you are extending possibly slightly more in tax as the purchaser, but you have the ability to claim at least some of it or a good portion of it back from the government, because you are generating income within the country. The other way of paying tax would be through transfer duty. So as a purchaser, you've either got to pay VAT or transfer duty. You cannot get away with not paying a tax on a purchase of a property. And transfer duty is calculated, so it's calculated on the purchase price in exactly the same way as VAT is. So it's a percentage of the purchase price, but transfer duty is calculated on a sliding scale. So it's not a set percentage, it's on a sliding scale of the value of the property. And with the first million rand being exempt, and then it would be on the sliding scale. So to give you an idea, probably it would be around 10 to 12% would be the calculation of transfer duty versus relative to purchase price. So a 10 million rand property in South Africa is likely to attract about $1 million rands worth of transfer duty. Okay. But having said that, it's relative to the value of the property. So a 50 million rand property is going to be at a slightly higher scale. You'll end up paying 6 million rand in transfer duty. So as opposed to 10%, that sliding scale would have gone up to 12%. So those are the property taxes that apply to property purchases. And
like is there a sales tax or an income tax? And actually, going back before that, who pays this transfer duty? The seller?
No, the purchaser will pay it.
So about how many purchases have to pay the VAT, or are most houses that are sold not registered for that tax, so to speak?
Yes. So
big number, 50% is big, and then on top of that, another 10 to 12% transfer duty is.
No, it's either or. It's
okay,
it's either or, not both. So, and I would say the vast majority of residential property attracts transfer duty rather than VAT. So VAT is only if it's going to be used or has been used as a business.
And the first million is exempt.
Yes.
That makes a huge difference. Because it's more a wealth tax, is what that sounds like, a wealth transfer tax.
It is. And then when you sell a property, you will pay what's called capital gains tax, and that is also calculated on a sliding scale. And then for foreigners, foreign purchasers will need to pay what's called a withholding tax. So that is, in essence, a capital gains tax, but because they don't necessarily pay tax within South Africa, and capital gains tax is, the calculation of capital gains tax is based on your overall income. So foreigners will rather pay a set rate, which is withholding tax of 7.5% of the selling price of the property. So that will get paid over by the conveyancing attorney to the government, and then they will do calculations, and there might be a small portion that is refunded to the seller, but in general terms, the foreign seller needs to keep in mind that they are going to pay around about 7.5% in tax, and that's on the purchase, the selling price of that property.
The seller, 7.5%.
Yes. So that's if it's not a South African citizen. If it's a foreign, someone who's come into the country, bought property here, and is now on selling it.
Got it. Let me go back quickly to the mortgage. About how many purchases are cash versus getting a loan? You call it a bond mortgage, but are most purchases involving a lender?
Yes, I would say most, certainly to some degree. So a lot of purchasers opt not to pay the full amount in cash, or fund themselves the full amount of, and they will take a bond of a certain amount. So sometimes that's 50%, sometimes much more. It also depends very much on what they qualify for with the bank. So we as agents will help to put them in touch with bond originators who will help get them the best deal with the various banks. And so the most amount of bond at obviously the least amount of monthly installment, and that's dependent on various factors such as the length of the bond, the credit worthiness of each client. So those those factors will come into play as to, you know, what can be offered to that client. But I would say a large proportion of purchases will take some kind of financing arrangement.
So what do you think the average cash down would be on a purchase?
Well, the minimum cash down is usually around 10%, which is the deposit required. But then it can be, you know, anything up to 40-50% can be put down. So I mean, in the Western Cape, the average purchase price of a property is 1.7 million rand, but depending on the area, you know, that varies quite significantly. You know, so for instance, in Camps Bay, it's quite difficult to find a property under, or certainly a full title property, a home, under around 8 million rand. So for first time home buyers, it's, you know, it's a difficult market to slot into as a first time home buyer, and certainly without some kind of financing arrangement, it's a lot more difficult.
Okay. So when you go to market a property, just in short, what is it that you do to get, you know, maximum exposure, so to speak?
So I would market the property on, we have a Sotheby's local website. We also have a Sotheby's international website, and affiliated to those two sites, there's various online publications and sites that are affiliates of ours. So for instance, if I list something on our international site, it will also go to various places like James Edition, and there's a whole list of other portals that it will be exposed to. So that will automatically happen, as well as the other websites that I mentioned, the more public websites such as Private Property and Property 24. We also have a publication, a local coffee magazine, coffee table type of magazine, which essentially is a lifestyle magazine, and it has, you know, anything from top restaurants to iconic watch brands and aspirational cars and articles of that nature. And then some of our top properties are also given exposure in that magazine. So we have that locally, it's called Private Edition, and we also have an international version of that. So those are some various, and then our database, and, you know, direct communication with our database. So we have a computer system that allows us to keep in contact with our database all the time, and it reminds us about certain buyers and buyers' requirements, or sellers. So we get to keep on top of our database in that respect. And if a property comes up that suits a buyer's requirements, that, you know, has been a buyer from maybe 6 months back, you know, it will cue the agent to get in touch with that list of buyers. And so we would market like that. And then we do a lot of social media marketing. We, you know, Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn, and TikTok and the various social media platforms. We also do things like having cocktail evenings where we would invite perhaps other agents or people that we know could be interested in that sort of property. And we have either an open house or a cocktail evening or that sort of thing, and we'd put that out on social media and invite interested parties to attend. So those would be some of the ways we would market a property for a seller.
So what do you know what the average sale price is in your town? I know that would vary greatly depending on the area and whatnot, but do you have an idea of what the average might be? I'm trying to get my arms also around the conversion between the dollar and the rand.
Yeah. So I mean the figure that I gave you just before of 1.7 million rand. So that's the average purchase price in our province of the Western Cape. But
that's only $90,000.
Yes, but that's going to vary greatly from area to area. As I say, property in Camps Bay, Llandudno, it's probably going to vary anything from 9-10 million to anything like 80 million, 90 million, even 100 million rand.
So that's 500,000 to, let's see,
3 million, 4 million, $5 million.
$5 million. Got it.
Yes.
But it sounds like it's more affordable compared to a lot of major cities in the US. And so these taxes, which seem higher, while they may be high percentage wise, you're still getting a more affordable home so it sounds like you're getting a lot for your money there.
Absolutely. And that's why, Cape Town is such a popular city for foreign buyers. What you're getting for what you're paying is way above what you could get elsewhere in the world. So you'd have to pay a lot more in another city for the quality of life and the beauty that you're getting with a home purchase here in Cape Town.
And that's what I want to go back to my question earlier about the wealthy buyers or the higher end buyers. And that is what clubs are there that exist there that you can be a part of? What lifestyle purchases are made with regards to organizations or clubs or things that you can be involved in? Here, it might be a country club with a golf course and tennis, and there are beach clubs. There's different types of clubs in different parts of the world. What is the really sought after associations, organizations, clubs that people want to be a part of there?
I would say in South Africa, golf is very popular here. So golf clubs and housing estates set around golf clubs command high prices for not just the homes but also for the memberships into the club. We don't have the same sort of beach clubs that you have and that Europe has. So here, the beaches are public space, and so no one controls essentially the beaches or access to the beaches. They're considered public, and everyone has access to them. So we don't have the formalized sort of system whereby you purchase a beach bed for the day. We have more informal sellers but it's purely up to your discretion whether you want to buy or rent a beach bed for the day, and they will drag it to a patch of sand for you, but it's not a designated area, so you're well within your rights to just take your towel or your own chair or your own beach umbrella, whatever, and set it up wherever you would like. And we have informal sellers on our beaches that will come around and offer you drinks and snacks and that kind of thing. But there's not one restaurant or club that controls that. So any restaurant has to be on the promenade or on the beach strip, but not on the sand area.
Are there
So
any high society clubs that people really want to be a part of there? Like notable?
I would say the housing estates that offer an all-encompassing experience, such as a golf club, a restaurant. Some even have schools on them or right next to them. So there are several of those around South Africa that are considered exclusive, and the wealthy will definitely look at those as possible purchasing opportunities.
Okay. And what are the top things to do? I know you can hike that mountain. It sounds like you can go to the beach. You can surf, it sounds like.
Surfing is very popular. Cycling is very popular. We have one of the most well-attended cycling races in the world here that happens in Cape Town. We have, almost every sport you can think of, and obviously rugby is one of our top sports in South Africa, and soccer. So we have stadiums, and we have a lot of infrastructure around those sports. Cricket is another very popular sport in South Africa. Swimming, beach, hockey, tennis is very popular here. Hiking, walking, running, and then things like on the Atlantic seaboard, you can do skydiving, you can do paragliding. So loads of water sports are very popular in South Africa. Yes.
What are some of the vacation destinations if you live there, and how far is it to get there? Like here we go to the beach, or we go skiing in Colorado, or whatever. What is that like when you're living there?
I would say your options are the various beach and coastal towns, and some of them would be, for some that is Cape Town, but for others, a lot of Cape Townians would maybe go to areas like Plettenberg Bay or Knysna. And then there's also the areas which are sort of within the mountains, or considered to be good for hiking, good for walking, very beautiful areas such as the Cedarburg or Ceres, those sorts of areas. And then, as I mentioned earlier this afternoon, the game parks. So game parks and nature reserves are very high up in terms of South Africans wanting time away. A lot of South Africans either own property or timeshare on some of these game reserves and go and spend time there. And so those would probably be. We don't have a snow skiing kind of climate here, so skiing isn't generally something that is largely a focus in South Africa. It would be your beach holidays, your country holidays, and your game parks.
Got it. So as we start to wrap up here, well, first of all, is there anything else that you think that people should know about looking to buy or sell a house in your area that we haven't already covered? I know we've gone into great detail in many different areas.
Uh, no, I think we have pretty much touched on most of it. Yeah, I would say that, you know, people from around the world come and visit South Africa. Come and see what we have to offer. It's really an extraordinary country, and offers such value for visitors, as well as for all our residents here. We have arguably one of the best lifestyles in the world. So it's a good place to live, and it's a good place to come and visit.
Well, what are some of your most memorable experiences, whether it's a memorable client or a memorable client experience? Could be a great experience, could be bad. Anything that is
Well,
top.
I tend not to dwell on the negative ones.
Fair enough.
Um, I think it's yeah, the one that I mentioned previously, of the client that made the decision really very quickly. I mean, that's a good experience, but generally, I just love being around various people and meeting people from all over the world, and guiding them to a positive purchase experience. So, I think as an agent, one has to have integrity and an honest outlook, be transparent, and try and do the best for your seller as well as your buyer. And it's a very rewarding experience when that comes together well.
Well, I agree. I have the same sentiments as you, and clearly this is the transparency and the integrity and the interest in touching people's lives in a positive way is why you're so successful. So it's been a really good time together, and it takes time to walk through all of these details, but I very much value your time and your willingness and interest in letting me and the public know what it's like to buy and sell houses there, and how can people get a hold of you?
Well, through the Sotheby's website, so they can just look at my area, Camps Bay, back over in Llandudno, or just look me up under my name, Andrea Glew, and contact me through there.
Okay, great. Well, I hope to visit soon. We'll see what happens in the next year or two, and I'll be looking for good cheap flights if possible, if that's a thing. I think that
That's
comes every once in a while.
definitely, it's definitely possible. And what's lovely is that there are so many direct flights now connecting Cape Town directly to the US, various areas of the US. So look out for those flights.
And when is the best time to come?
I would always say the summer months, but having said that, I have loads of buyers. In fact, I've got a buyer at the moment from New York, and he was saying to me earlier today that actually the shoulder season is actually very nice. It's a bit too hot in the US at the moment, and he's loving being here. So you know. We offer something at every time of the year to be enjoyed.
Nice. Well, thank you again. I very much appreciate your time. Have a great day or evening, and let's connect again soon.